Hi everyone, and welcome to this full moon eclipse video recording. I'm making this ceremony for you on the morning of the full moon. It is Saturday the 28th of October. The moon is going to be full in Taurus tonight. It will be about 8:23 or exactly 8:23 GMT in the UK. It's going to be a little before 2 a.m. here in India. So this morning felt like the perfect time to record this. Obviously, I love alastminute.com, but I think it's really interesting to see how the energy unfolds in the run up to a full moon or an eclipse, particularly. And then we often really notice as we reach the peak, something really has shifted and we start to see what it's all really going to be about. So I feel that this week has been quite magnetic, is the word that's coming in. It's been very mercurial. Personally, for me, it's been extra mercurial because my Mercury is at 4 degrees Scorpio. So I've had a Mercury return through the centre of this week. But Mercury's been really active moving into Scorpio. And Mercury is all about communication, all about the voice, how we tell our story, how we get our truth out there, how we find our authentic voice. And also in the same kind of journey, in the same part of the charts, the part of the skies, is Mars. So Mercury and Mars are very tight together in Scorpio. In fact, they are in a conjunction today and they're conjunct the sun today. So that's going to be happening opposite the full moon tonight. So there's kind of a lot of big energy, not just with the full moon, which we know is always big, and not just an eclipse, which we know is always massive and quantum, but we've also got some other really big stuff happening in the skies. So this ceremony is really all about giving you a little bit of background to the astrology, giving you a wider kind of narrative around this full moon eclipse and what's really going on, the timelines you can look at in your own life, your own chart. We're going to look at some journaling prompts. We're going to talk about my favorite things, tarot cards, and I'm going to do a little reading for you to help you move through this really big energy. But let's start at the beginning. Where else? What is a full moon eclipse? Well, a full moon, you don't need me to tell you, is the one where you can see the moon. We had a new moon eclipse 2 weeks ago on the 14th of October. That was a new moon in Libra. The new moon is when we can't see the moon in the sky. It's when the moon and the sun are aligned. And actually the sun is blocking out the moon, and the shadow of the sun is blocking out the moon, rather. So we are in the opposite situation now. In terms of the lunar cycle, we normally say that a new moon is about beginnings, it's the gateway opening, it's manifesting, it's getting things off the blocks, getting things started. A full moon is the completion. This is usually an end point. It's the end of a journey. It's the gate closing. It's the culmination of the story. It's the epilogue. And usually it's the part of the story that's here to really give us a final kind of like twist or a punchline, just something we need to know in order to really move on. I've got my little swooshy bits of cloth here getting in the way. I'm going to do something about that or it's going to drive me crazy all the way through this recording. So the full moon is already quite a biggie, and this full moon is Taurus. So you probably already know that astrology works in pairs. Everything has an opposite and an equal. And what we have going on today is the full moon in Taurus, which is opposite the sun in Scorpio. So these two signs deal very specifically with the idea of resource, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we move through the journey today. But what makes it an eclipse? So the eclipse is energetically a really super quantum portal. And it's where actually the degree points of, mathematically and physics-wise, it's where the degree points of the sun and the moon mean that there is a bit of a shadow from one to the other. So in this case, it's a partial lunar eclipse tonight, where part of the moon in certain parts of the world will be obscured by the sun's shadow. I know I'm not going to see it here in India. I'm actually not entirely sure where you're going to see it. I haven't bothered to look it up. You can Google that. I'm pretty sure you won't be seeing that in the UK, because if you were, it'd be all over the news and the internet this morning. However, what eclipses are all about is really what goes on the inside, not what goes on the outside. They are all about really big shadow work, about things moving really fast, about whatever's been happening in your life, turning up the speed and it pushing through an absolute rate of knots. So eclipses always happen in pairs. We always have a new moon followed by a full moon. It can be the other way around. What we have got this week, is that we've just had a new moon eclipse in Libra, and now we're going to have the full moon eclipse in Taurus. And this is kind of an oddity because they're not the natural pair. The pair is Scorpio and Taurus, not Libra and Taurus. But one of the things that makes this moon extra big is that it's actually the end of a kind of an eclipse pairing. So we have eclipses that are attached to the nodes of the moon, and these change about every 18 to 20 months. So we have eclipses over the course of an 18 to 20 month period in the same two signs. And then there's a little overlap before we move on to the next two. So this is where we complete the overlap effectively. We have had 18 months of Scorpio and Taurus eclipses, and then we just had one, we had the Libra and Aries kind of getting started, and now we're just wrapping up Taurus and Scorpio, and then the next two are going to be fully the Libra Aries axis. So it is a little bit of a journey. We're kind of very much we often refer to the space between eclipses as an eclipse tunnel, but we really are in a big tunnel for this one. We're between two eclipses and also between two wider axes. So eclipses in general, and I think particularly when we have these gateways where we're kind of reaching the end of a cycle, the end of an axis, really help us to zoom out and see that bigger cycle, which is what the cycles of the moon, what the phases of the moon, what all this astrological work is really all about, for me anyway. You know, astrology gives us a lens to see the world through different timelines, through different perspectives, different experiences. You know, when the sun is in Gemini, we're invited to look particularly at the spotlight being on how we are kind of interacting, our social selves, our butterfly, how we move around and how we can context switch and interact with different types of people. When the sun is in Scorpio, we are in a season which is all about the deep dark work and the sacral chakra and the roots of the body, the stuff that we hide, the things that, the secrets and the lies, basically the stuff we keep hidden from ourselves even because we're not ready to process it. So we have these big kind of overall overarching stories. But what the moon does is allow us to kind of journey through them every month. And particularly if you're a woman, if you have a cycle, or even if you had a cycle, if you don't have it anymore, you know what this feels like as you move through a journey from opening a gateway to completing a gateway in your menstrual cycle. And the moon really offers us this kind of illumination, this lens, this filter in a wider scale. And then what happens with eclipses is that we can see it in an even bigger scale. So when we have a full moon, the first window we look at is when was the new moon in that sign. The new moon in Taurus was back in May this year. So the first window you can look at is from May up to now. And actually I'm going to check the exact date for you because I have not checked that and I should have done. So the new moon in Taurus was all about opening a new journey in terms of the Taurian themes, which is grounding, stability, abundance, the having of the things, feeling secure in our bodies. Taurus is all about that kind of structure and having, you know, feeling like you've got a hold of something and you know what's going on and you're safe. So that new moon was May the 19th for the train spotters among you. So that gateway opened on May the 19th and now it's closing. So the first invitation is what has been happening for you in Taurian themes. So abundance, money, stuff, physicality, the having of the things, and resource is a really important word here. What's been happening in terms of your resources over the last 6 months? What started at the end of May that is now coming to a close? And I know for me personally, I find these 6 month windows really helpful because 6 months seems like a lot. It can also just be a blink of an eye, and it really has felt that way to me in this last 6 months. So have a little look. If you journal, it's really nice to go back to your journals. If you don't, you can look at your phone, look at your calendar, look at what you were doing, what events were you at, what was going on in your work life, you know, what were the family up to. Just try and project yourself back to what was going on in that third week of May, roughly, and just have a look at the big themes in your life, particularly around that Taurian story, and see where it's got to now, what's coming to a natural end. And there might be, I know this is true for me, it always is, there might be something that you're slightly struggling to let go of, that you're a bit like, oh, it's just, this feels like it's done, but I'm just sort of not quite ready yet. The full moon is your message to go, you know what, it's time to put it down. So it's really helpful to know what you're putting down. So have a look back into your journals, reflect into your life, sit in meditation if it's in your practice. It really is helpful to reflect back. It's also really helpful to look, if you know a bit about your chart, and if you don't, of course I can help you, to have a look at which part of your chart contains Taurus. So this will give you further illumination and a further clue to help you understand exactly what's going on in a certain part of your life. So for me, for example, Taurus is my 4th house, it's cusp 4th and 5th. So the themes are going to be about abundance, stuff, the having of the things, value and self-worth, but very specifically for me in the themes around the 4th house, which is the home, family, kind of ancestry, structures, the roots and foundations of your life, and the 5th house, creativity and self-expression. So I can see some really clear portals opening and closing here for me because I've made a big geographical move in this window of time. So the things that were important to me in terms of the values and the resources I was holding dear back in May have now completely changed, and I'm moving through a very different part of life and a very different understanding of what resource looks like. So that is a little clue as to how to look at this eclipse in terms of the Taurian themes and in your own chart. So if you don't have your chart, you can go to my website. I'm going to put a link under this video and you can download it for free. If you need to understand a bit more about how to read your chart, there is an eclipse cheat sheet, which I will attach also under this video. You can download that. That's going to help you understand whereabouts in your chart to look for Taurus and for this full moon, and how to read the top themes that I'm going to talk about in a minute relative to yourself. And of course, if you want to go deeper, you can always contact me. We can go through it one-to-one, and there is a course coming up that's going to teach you how to do all of this for yourself. So you don't even need me, you just need yourself. You can be your own astrologer. Everybody can be. So I feel like I'm talking really quick today. Sorry if I'm firing through. Maybe I'll slow this down a little bit in the edit. So the Taurus story is from May the 19th up to today, October the 28th. That is this year's Taurian lunar cycle, new moon to full moon, a beginning and an end, a journey in between. What's it been looking like for you? But eclipses give us an even bigger and more expansive perspective. And what we're coming to today is the end of the Scorpio-Taurus eclipse cycle. This is the last eclipse in this story. There's always 4. So we have a new and a full moon, each in 2 signs. And the Taurus-Scorpio story began back in November 2021 with the new moon in Scorpio. So you can zoom back even further, and I had to do this myself this morning. I scrolled back on my iCal to have a look at what I was doing around there, and I had a reasonable idea because it was the week of my birthday, and I remember very particularly what I was doing over that new moon. It's really interesting to go back to that time, to have a look at what was happening in your life. Again, if you journal, it's really useful to have a reflection. And if you don't, and we're going to do this in a minute anyway, you can sit in meditation and just see if you can project yourself back into the energies that you were carrying at the beginning of this cycle. So a new moon in Scorpio is a potent thing. Scorpio, as we know, is always a potent energy. It holds a lot of shadow, a lot of darkness, but a huge amount of regeneration and phoenix from the flames, resurrection energy. So a new moon in Scorpio is nearly always about starting a new journey in terms of going down into that sacral root where we hold a lot of emotions, all of our water energy. Scorpio is a fixed water sign. And it's all about the idea that we are going into that space to excavate, to really have a rake through and to move through the things that are not going to be for us, that we need to process, that we need to get out of our body, out of our somatic field, surface and dissolve, so that we can move on with our purpose, our dharma, and staying on the path we're here to be part of in this life. So a new moon in Scorpio would have really opened that gateway, and that I think was about November 15th, 5th. I'm just checking for you. I wish I had done this before. I always forget, but I have at least got a laptop here that I can review. Let's have a little look. So the new moon in Scorpio was November the 5th, 2021. And it was at 12 degrees of Scorpio. Today's full moon is at 5 degrees of Taurus. So it's really worth having a look at your own chart. If you know how to run your chart over different timelines, go back to November 2021. What was happening? What was going on? You can see this in clues on your photos on your phone. I love to do this, to go back over full and new moon periods and just have a look at the dates and be like, oh, what was I doing? Who was I with? Where was I going? What was life looking like? There's many ways you can do this personal projection. But where we're arriving at today is the end game, the end point. And actually we've been on the journey into this end point over the last 2 to 4 weeks as we've moved through this eclipse portal that we've been in. So what we're arriving at today is actually the end of a really big cycle of nearly 2 years that began on November the 5th, 2021. So take a look back, have a look at what was big for you then, what was starting then, and maybe it was a feeling. And I would say, because we're in a watery, scorpionic, emotional landscape, it almost certainly was a feeling. So look at how your emotions were. Like, what were you thinking about in your life? Pause for the plane. What were you considering maybe starting? Was it a new relationship? Were you beginning to feel differently about your work or your path? Was it where you were in the first inklings of maybe I want to have a baby in the next year, or maybe it's time to relocate, or maybe I feel like I really want to start looking at ditching my career and making my side hustle my passion, my job? So have a little journey through, and you'll probably find that something was starting around then that now feels like it's arriving at its natural ending. And if you can't see the natural ending, that is what this journey and today's video and ceremony is all for. It's to help you reach in and see if you can understand what that journey is so that you can apply the relevant closure as we move through this full moon. So that is the two big kind of time frames that you can work with when it comes to this particular full moon in Taurus. And don't forget, the more you can look at your own chart individually, the more you can really refine and fine tune this for yourself. You can really make total clear visibility on what is actually going on for you in your chart, rather than all of this like broad strokes astrology that I'm talking about and that you see everywhere on the internet this weekend. It's really valuable, of course. There are big themes that affect us all. We're going to talk about those now. But also you can really, really understand this personally when you know what's going on in your own chart. What I really love about doing this today is it's like 8 a.m. and I'm already really sweaty. So completely opposite full moon energy to where I would normally be for a full moon in Taurus. But let's see how we roll. So there are some really big overall themes with this moon. And where do the themes come from? Obviously, we have the themes of the moon itself, the Taurus energy. We have the eclipse themes, which basically put everything on warp speed. And really are quite brutal in the sense that whatever you are supposed to be doing and seeing and feeling over this moon is unavoidable. You are not going to get to lie down and have it float over you. So those are the big kind of shapes of the moon. It's always a lot of noise in India, so I'm just going to keep going. But the actual kind of stories in terms of the kind of micro-astrology are really fascinating for this one. Scorpio and Taurus together do hold a lot of karmic energy. And when we talk about karmic releases, it's that kind of sense of somewhere between destiny and fatalism. Scorpio has a real sense of fatalism about it, that we cannot avoid the thing that's meant for us. We also can't avoid letting go of things when they are not for us, that we can hang on as much as we like, but we're not going to be able to hold on. So this moon is in Taurus. It's opposite Sun and Scorpio. This is all happening at 5 degrees. So a good place to start with your chart is to have a look at what is going on around 5 degrees of Taurus and Scorpio. If you have planets, points or activity going on there, this is going to be extra big for you. And likewise, if you have planets, points or activity at 5 degrees-ish of Leo or Aquarius, what that means is that this full moon is going to be square those parts of your chart. So you may notice this coming up in actually a slightly more conflictual way. So we'll talk about the themes. Scorpio and Taurus are all about the having of the stuff. And I often describe this as, Taurus is like the romance. It's the honeymoon period. It's the kind of the lovely like flowers and glitter and soft focused lighting and milk tray adverts and all that kind of lovely romantic stuff. And Scorpio is like the BDSM, leather-clad little sister or big sister maybe. And it's not necessarily as obviously polarized as that, but Taurus sees the having and the value and the abundance of stuff in this kind of beautiful romantic connectivity. Scorpio sees it in terms of power and control and in terms of self-value rather than external value. So Taurus and Scorpio axis is all about how resourced we are. And I think a theme that's come up so much for me the last week, and I had such a great chat with my friend Ebony. We had a podcast that came out yesterday that I'm going to also link, you definitely should listen to. It's all about resource. We were talking about the idea that, we move through, and particularly through these last few years, when you project back to 2021, November, we were literally, actually that day we went into a lockdown in the UK. I very specifically remember November the 5th, 2021. So it's really interesting. We were in a place of scarcity in all the ways, scarcity of time, scarcity of money for most of us, especially the self-employed. We were in a real place of scarcity of positivity. It was the winter lockdown. It was really grim. Collectively, health scarcity was really a thing. It just wasn't a great time collectively for the planet. I mean, now it's really not a great time for the planet either, clearly, but in a very different way. So resource was not really flowing, I don't feel, back in November 2021. And that was the Scorpio energy. But now we're in Taurus energy. And resource perhaps does flow differently with Taurus. Taurus is the sign most associated with the having of money, the having of abundance, wealth, feeling secure. But resource doesn't have to be just money. That's a really important point. I know this is something I struggle with and trip over and over again with such a lot of Scorpio in my chart. Resource can be about, do I feel resourced within? Do I feel like I've got strength? Actually, for me, I know that I've now got incredible resilience and strength that I've seen grow in this cycle, this last 2-year cycle. So for me, actually, the resource I now have is a very different kind of resource to what I thought I wanted and I thought I was missing at the beginning of this journey. So it can be really helpful to do a journaling prompt that's around resource, and I'm using that word specifically rather than abundance or wealth, which are traditionally associated with the themes that we're working on today. Resource is really such a wider energy. So I'd love for you to take a moment to write down, where am I well resourced? And this could mean, yes, I have enough money in my bank account. I feel like I can book a holiday without saving. Well done, you. I feel like I can start a new project. I have what I need in terms of my strength, my willpower, my resilience, my friendship group, my support from my family, my self-belief. There's lots of themes around resource that are not about just cash in hand. So take a little moment, pause the video, and write down where you are well resourced. And it's really useful to reflect on what you might have written in November 2021, how life looked like, how it felt, how was your resource situation then. And I'm very sure you're going to see an arc of difference and an arc of evolution, because that's what this journey, this eclipse, is all about. So I got on a sidetrack there. I promised you a bit more about the wider themes, and actually resource, obviously, this one. But let's talk quickly about the other planetary things that are happening over this particular lunation. So we have got Mars and Mercury very close together at 10 and 11 degrees of Scorpio, and the Sun is going to be at 5 degrees of Scorpio. So they're all is it 5 or is it 12? My brain is utterly confused today. Let me just pop this back to today's chart. For some reason, I've got myself in a real tangle between 5 and 12 degrees. I can't quite remember what we're doing today. Let me have a look. No, it's 5 degrees. 12 was the last one. 5 degrees. So 5 degrees of Taurus is where the moon is happening. 5 degrees of Scorpio is opposite. And then we have got Mercury and Mars at 10 and 11. So that's what we call an open conjunction. A conjunction is when two planetary bodies, celestial bodies, are no more than 3 degrees apart. So Mercury and Mars are in a direct conjunction today, and they're just very close to the Sun. They're not like right on top of it, but they're pretty close. It's enough, and because they're in conjunction, that it's creating quite a big noise around this energy, around this moon. So what do Mercury and Mars do when they're together? When they are a very activating energy. Mercury is the communicator, the conversationalist, all about the word, how we speak, write, talk, tell our story, speak our truth, get our voice out there to the world. It's the art of being heard. Mars is the art of doing, actually one foot in front of the other, taking action, moving forward, not just talking or thinking or planning, but doing, putting pedal to the metal and getting on with it. So when Mars and Mercury are close together, it's usually a sign of major action, actually revolutionary action. It is quite the signature of revolution, in fact, Mars and Mercury in conjunction. It's all about the idea that my voice will be heard. I will no longer stand for not being in this conversation. I'm going to make things happen. I'm going to affect change. And with this all conjunct the Sun, which obviously is a spotlight, illuminating this, giving it fuel, giving it fire, giving it light and heat, all the things we know the Sun gives us that we need to live. It's really kind of adding quite a lot of heat to an already quite explosive conjunction. On top of that, we have got the different illumination from the moon casting a light across this, giving us also quite an emotional perspective. So overall, it's volatile energy is what I'm saying. Be prepared. I've already fallen foul of this last night, or maybe not fallen foul so much as fallen in perfect tune last night, to potential arguments, to getting into scraps on WhatsApp is my thing I've managed to do today. To, not even accidentally, but just going, you know what, screw you, I'm just going to say what I think. And actually that person goes, yeah, me too. And then you're in an argument. So there is that kind of energy around this moon. People going, I am here to speak my truth, to be heard, and I'm going to make changes out of speaking it because I'm not going to be quiet anymore. So if you, like me, have noticed this week, there's been a few of those things bubbling under. You've maybe been having a few conversations that feel like they have the propensity to start exploding, or maybe they've just got you really riled inside and you're doing the thing where you re-listen to voice notes over and over, or feel like the fire rising when you tell somebody the story about this conversation. You're probably feeling into the what's been the run-up to this big moon and this big astrology that's sat around it. I'm not always the best at advice for full moons because I tend to be quite reactive myself, and especially with this one being across an energy which for me is very personal and very potent, I feel like I've probably already tripped myself up at least 3 times this week with being quite vocal in my energy. But I think the best advice I can give you for navigating this moon is to be really mindful, to try and bring a little bit of thought in before you speak, to know that your words are going to have power now. If you say to someone, you know what, screw you, I'm out, you will be out. There won't be any going back. So be really sure that that is what you want, because it's going to be quite a final energy over this moon, and there will not be an opportunity to go back and fix things later. So it's really important to feel that this, the power and the opportunity of this kind of mercurial Martian action together is used for your own highest good. If you use it to burn things to the ground you no longer need, that's great, but know that those are going to be ashes, they're done. So really take a moment to think what it is that you definitely don't need and what it is that you are absolutely wanting to make sure you activate and start under this moon, because the energy is very potent, even though it's a full moon, for actually getting things moving as well. And usually that motion is out of closure or an endpoint of something else. So if you had to leave something, leave a job, leave a relationship, relocate to the other side of the world in order to close something off, the energy that's coming out of this is almost speaking your truth. Okay, now I've done that. What next? Let's get started. What did I do it for? What was the point? What was my reason to be? So that's quite volatile, big stuff. Helpfully, we have got a good dollop of Jupiter mixed up with this moon as well, because Jupiter is sat at 11 degrees of Taurus. Now, the moon is exalted in Taurus, which is a great phrase. Exaltation in astrology means it's in its kind of highest expressions. The moon is in a really good place when it's in Taurus. It's really happy there. It can really kind of, support us and express its energy, which is all about intuition, about emotions, about our feelings, our inner Shakti, our feminine landscape. It can do that really well in Taurus. Jupiter is also really happy in Taurus, because Jupiter is about expansion, about making things bigger, about growth, about positivity. And Taurus is all about the stuff, the money, the having of the things. So Jupiter in Taurus is, where we are for this 12-month period. We're in a really lovely cycle of Jupiter in Taurus. It is about abundance. It's about making things grow, about watering, not even watering the seed, but seeing the blooms come up after you've watered the seed. So Jupiter and Taurus collectively has been bringing themes of money and stuff to the surface on a global level, and I think we've seen that a lot with some of the conflict energy going on, particularly in the US, for example, with cases and legal conflicts about what's going on with money and people actually speaking their truth. I'm talking, of course, about the ex-president. Just as the morning metalwork kicks off in Agonda, so bear with me for some noise. I will try and deal with it in the edit if it's a bit shouty when I listen back to this. So we have had Jupiter and Taurus themes showing up in terms of the money and the stuff. And actually, what Jupiter is bringing to this moon is a little bit of lightness, a little bit of bounce, almost kind of like, okay, great, now I can grow the thing that I have been working on clearing, the thing that I've had to get out of the way, the thing this kind of Scorpio and Taurus energy is taking me on, the dance about resource. Do I have enough? Do I want more? What type of more do I want? How is my self-worth in all of this? This journey is kind of coming to a head today, really, coming to its completion point. But Jupiter in Taurus is very close to the moon to remind us that expansion is available no matter what version of resource it is we feel we have. So Mars and Mercury potentially explosive, volatile, not necessarily bad, but unavoidably big. One of those moments where you're like, can't get away, it's definitely happening. Jupiter in Taurus by the moon, helpful, expansive, beautiful, opening. So collectively, these are some really nice energies. It's unavoidably a huge moon. There is just no moving through that. All we can do is flow, and all you can do is flow. And I would say really spend some time with your chart in Taurus and Scorpio. Look at the houses they rule for you, how you're feeling about those areas of life, what's ending in those spaces, what you want to just bring to a swift conclusion, particularly if you've been working through things like contracts, or you've got tangled up resources with other people, you're stuck in leases with an ex, if you have got kind of shared mortgages or shared bank accounts that need to be changed and divided again. This is the optimum time to really be looking at how you complete those journeys and just get them done. Now it can happen fast, quick, cleanly, and you can move on, and that's only good news, I think. So, we are going to talk about tarot cards, and I'm going to show you the two cards which are the anchors for the season. So you probably know from if you listen or watch me or anyone else in this sort of realm that tarot and astrology are innately interconnected, and that tarot is is really kind of a visual interpretation of astrology in many ways. The major arcana, which is the 22 cards that make up the front end of a tarot deck, each have a correlation to an astrological zodiac sign. So the one that's relative to Taurus is the Hierophant, which is one of these quite unusual cards. People often look a bit blank when they draw it because it is a bit of a confusing name. And Hierophant basically means teacher, educator. So often it's seen as the card of a mentor, as someone coming into your life as a guide, as a new person to lead or to way show, to light the way for you. And the Hierophant, you can see, he's got water underneath him, but he's kind of, it always looks like he's got giant horns, I think, this card, but he's actually in front of the moon and he's got the light of the universe within his mind. It's all about learning and education. But he's also got this connection to the sky, the earth and the sky. So the Hierophant is about bridging that gap between the ground and beneath the celestial heavens above us. So the Hierophant is a great card to have on your altar, to have out just in front of your laptop. Mine's just wedged here today, just to remind you that this is the primary energy of this moon, about learning, about education, about seeking out guidance. You know, Taurus likes to know and wants to feel safe, and one of the best ways to feel safe is to have knowledge. So acquiring knowledge, you know, using your privilege to acquire knowledge, acquire understanding. You can think a lot about what's happening in the Middle East at the moment when you think about that analogy. Is a really useful thing to do over this moon. What do you need to gather knowledge on? Where is your knowledge maybe got a few holes in it? Where do you not have the information you need to make the choices that are required of you, that you require of yourself? So if you have a deck, find the Hierophant, pull it out. And you may also want to pull out my favourite card in the deck. Nobody else's. Death. This is the Scorpio card. So we're working with polarities. Having the two together I think is really useful, because the moon is not just about the sign it's in, it's about the sign it's opposite when it's a full moon. These two are innately connected and they tell a story. This is our learning, how we're going to move upwards, forwards and learn, educate ourselves, create a mentorship space where we can cultivate and nurture our inner growth. This is all about resurrection, regeneration, the phoenix from the flames. Scorpio energy is so often associated with the serpent shedding its skin, with the moth or with the butterfly emerging from its chrysalis, you know, really all spreading its wings. You know, I love this picture. She looks like she's dancing. She's not dying. She's kind of draping herself backwards and about to rise again. So there is this phoenix from the flames energy about Scorpio, and we are in Scorpio solar season. It's a big hitting energy. So this idea of the Taurian mentorship education story tied in with resurrection, with regeneration, gives us just a nice little lead in. What do you need to learn in order to be rebirthed? What do you need to educate yourself in order to move through the ending that's now turning into a new beginning? So it might be helpful to have these out and just use them as prompts to yourself over this weekend as we move through this energy. And what I'm going to do right now is just pull a couple of cards around these two, and I'll take a photo of it and post it in this feed as well, just to do some collective energetic tuning for us all. And I'm using the Moonchild Tarot, my favourite deck, but this is the Shadow edition, highly appropriate for the season we are in. You'll know that my regular edition of this is white and gold. This is the purple and gold shadow, and Danielle's reimagined so much of this deck. It's absolutely beautiful. I can't recommend it enough. So let's have a look at what's going to come through today. I'm shuffling these really badly because the tables are a really awkward height, so I can't really move my hands very well. Let's do a little table shuffle instead. It's a bit easier. So as I shuffle, we will reflect on the ambience of beautiful India. Oh, these are such a nice deck to shuffle. Look at that. Just a really nice, clean flip. Let's drop those cards into the deck. Just trying to work out where the next big noise is coming from. Like that, the card that you see and that I see on the bottom is the Tower. Everything must fall, everything must go. You cannot avoid. I think we'll just take that one out because I really love the Tower. It sits so well in Scorpio season, and it's a very Eclipse energetic card. The idea that the tower you're in is crumbling down and you can stay in it and burn to the ground, or you can jump and learn to swim. So which is it going to be? So as we do these cards, I pulled together a few prompts for you to reflect upon. So the first card that I'm going to pull is going to be about where we're receiving closure in our lives. This is a card for the collective. So interesting. This card has been coming up so much this week. I've pulled it twice already for me, and quite a few people have had it in my sessions as well. The Four of Cups is all about stillness and meditation. Cups is water energy, of course, which is perfect for Scorpio season. But it's a little bit reflective. It's almost a slight sadness to this card. It's a moment of, oh, these are all emotions, the journeys I've been on. You sort of see this visual of blooming energy from the root through to our heart and beyond. The Four of Cups is the idea of having to gently and gracefully let go, to realize that you're not able to hold on to all these emotions and things. They're not for you to keep hold of in your heart, your mind, and your body, your somatic experience forever. And that actually what's really going to be important is sitting with them as you have to gracefully and gently let them go. And that's a phrase I wrote on my notes actually for you for journaling about graceful closure. So where in your life are you receiving messages about endings and closure? Where in your life are you receiving messages about endings and closure? The Four of Cups is an invitation into stillness. The Fours are always cards of meditation and pause, sacred pause. So you can see this as an opportunity to sit and reflect with what is probably a little bit of discomfort, to be honest. Scorpio doesn't like to do things easily. Taurus does like to do things in comfort. And where they meet is that kind of interface between, I really need to move through this. It's not going to be pretty, but I want it to be. I've got to go through the hard stuff to get to the juicy stuff. So where in my life am I receiving messages about endings and closure? Press pause, have a little journal. And I feel like the Four of Cups is asking you to be with the discomfort and to be with the knowing that your emotions is the thing that really that's coming up for review over this moon. The next prompt that I'd written, I'd kind of already cheated and led you into it, is what action do I need to take to honour endings smoothly and gracefully? What action do I need to take to honour endings smoothly and gracefully? Nine of Wands. This is a great card, isn't it? Really evocative and scorpionic. So wands are all about fire. They're about the action and the doing. They are the Shiva energy, the dynamic, more masculine energy in our bodies, in our experiences. And the Nine of Wands is getting close to the completion point. 10 is the completion in tarot. So the 9 is almost like, and you can sort of see this slightly, it's almost a figure. It's so indistinct. If I hold it really close, you might get a sense. Kind of moving through the forest. The wands are seen here as these kind of really kind of like dark foresty trees. And it's almost the sense of, this lightness is moving through the last few bits of shadow. Very soon she's going to reach the end of that journey. This figure's going to emerge out of the forest into the new dawn, the new rising, the new grand rising. At the moment, they're still just mired in the last shreds of darkness, and this feels really appropriate for today's full moon eclipse. There's so much light around with that full moon, so bright in the sky. It was looking amazing last night. Do look up. But it is still essentially a very dark energy at this time of year. And as also we move towards Samhain, of course, which I haven't mentioned at all yet, which we move through the other side of the weekend. Much less of a thing here in India, of course, but Samhain, incredibly important in the UK and in the Northern European territories. So we'll touch on that later. So the Nine of Wands is your guideline card in terms of what action you need to take to honour endings smoothly and gracefully. The Nine of Wands is telling you that you're nearly there. The end is nigh. You are reaching the end of whatever journey it is that perhaps has been pretty painful in terms of getting things done. The action maybe has been slow and hard won, or maybe not won at all at this point. But we are arriving at a place where you're moving through and you're about to break through. So the message of the Nine of Wands is to hold tight. You're nearly there. But to keep getting one foot in front of the other. There's no time to take your foot off the pedal or your hands off the wheel. Keep driving, keep moving forward. Things will change. They always do. Everything is impermanent. So, and the last journal prompt I had for you today was, what do I need to learn about feeling resourced? How am I now more resourced than I was 2 years ago? And the invitation is to think not just about money, but about self-worth, about your inner strength and other aspects of your life that give you resource. the prompt again is, what do I need to learn about feeling resourced? How am I now more resourced than I was 2 years ago? And think not just about money, but about self-worth, about inner strength, and about all the other aspects of your life that give you resource. And here is a card to assist you. How perfect. The Page of Wands. So actually the 9 of Wands is followed by the 10, and then there is the Page. So we are missing a card in the middle here, but this feels perfect. That we are sitting in stillness, reflection, and meditation, acknowledging the impending ending and simply pushing through. A little bit of grit is required to move through the last stage of the darkness. Before we remember that we have everything we need. And I know this seems incredibly trite to say, but the Page of Wands is all about ignition. She is about beginning a big new journey. And actually this is a reimagined card. In the original Moonchild deck, the Page of Wands is holding kind of a ritual, holding a cup of fire in her hand and blowing it like she's about to send the energy, the way you blow incense across the room, start something new. And here she's in almost like a kind of temple. She's got her wands creating like a little teepee kind of vibe here, and she's floating, levitating, and ready to expand. And I have this sense looking at this card, and it's actually the first time I'm reading this for anyone in this new deck. It sort of feels like she's ready to rise. She's floating. She's already on her way. She's already in an upward trajectory. She's just waiting for these wands to slightly open up to allow her to pass through. This reminds me quite a lot of his Dark Materials in some ways, actually. So it's a really beautiful card. The Page of Wands is always a card about new starts, about new beginnings, about lighting the match, the touch paper under your new intentions. And it's also about embodying page energy, which is youthful energy. It's the maiden in the female archetypes. It's all about the idea that you are that kind of the version of you were the day you graduated college and you went out into the world. I've got everything I need. I'm ready to go. I'm in my prime before the world started beating you up and giving you all its shit to deal with. So the Page of Wands is a real message of hope and profound progress. And this is all very, very, very Mars-oriented. I feel like this Mars-Mercury conjunction today is really critical in today's energy. This is about being ready to start. This is a sacred ending, but more than anything else, and Scorpio knows this more than any other sign, this is a beginning. An ending is a beginning, is an ending. The two are united. They cannot be separated. They're opposite sides of the same coin. They are opposite ends of the same cycle. They merge into each other. So although this eclipse may feel really big in terms of something really coming to an end that you're feeling sad about, angry about, frustrated about, I know for me, I had a really big ending yesterday that really upset me, and I got on WhatsApp and started firing off messages, Mercury getting in there, and was just obviously this woke up this morning with remorse and wished I hadn't sent them all. But it's that kind of vibe. I know that even though I have frustration, that this is the beginning of something new. That clearing has had to happen to make space for something else to come in. There wasn't room for it to stay. And this is what the Page of Wands is telling us. We know we're at the end of something, but that ending is making space for this grand rising. What is your grand rising going to be? So these are your tarot cards for this eclipse. I love them. I hope you love them too. I will post some pictures of them for you to review. Don't forget that everything, though we're in a Taurus full moon, we are in the polarity of Scorpio. Scorpio energy is highly active. We are in the Scorpio sun season. We have a lot of big hitters in Scorpio. So Scorpio energy, is Marmite. I'm a good Scorpio. It's my birthday next week. I know how much people can find it challenging because I've seen that my whole life in my own relationships. But it is really here to support you. Scorpio is not to be feared. The energy is not to be feared. This full moon, this eclipse is not to be feared. It is simply pushing you on the path you're always supposed to be on. You cannot possibly miss what's meant for you. But this is just going to make it happen faster. And it might be a little bit uncomfortable or sticky, when you get to the end of the roller coaster and you're like, oh, I left my stomach somewhere back up there at the top. It's that kind of vibe, a little bit disorienting, but undeniably forwards. And Scorpio energy generally is about going into the past and into the roots and looking backwards. And what Taurus is really bringing, what this full moon is really bringing, is the light to drag all of that old stuff up, put it into the light and go, you know what, done, we're out, let's go, put it down. I think that's so exciting, don't you? So we are done talking about the the tarot, the astrology of this moon. I hope that's given you something to think about. I'm going to post lots of links and pictures and journal prompts underneath this video so you can spend time on this in your own timeline, in your own way, casting your rituals any way you like. I'm not going to go on for hours about rituals. I don't have everything here with me today. Still rebuilding everything in India. But obviously crystals and energies that you can work with in this season. In the Scorpio energy, I think it's really good to have black tourmaline around you today. If you have black tourmaline, it's a very protective energy and really something supportive during a eclipse. I personally always love malachite for both eclipses and for Scorpio season. It's also really great for Taurus because the colour green is really associated with Taurus, and malachite is a beautiful bright emerald green. It's all about the odyssey, the journey, the lava-like shapes in malachite are all about the idea that things are constantly moving. You don't know where it's going to go next. I find it very protective. I'm wearing smoky quartz today, which is that grounding, protective energy. Great for Scorpio season, great for eclipses when you can get in your own head and can all get a bit murky up there, a bit depressive and anxious. So smoky quartz, especially if like me, you're prone to those kind of lower vibration responses, is a really good protective stone for this vibe. Do have your cards out. It's a great time for intuiting. And as you probably know, I believe tarot is all about intuition. It's about speaking to your higher consciousness, about receiving messages from soul, spirit, and your guides. And there is no better season, and I mean none, than Scorpio. I know I'm egging it on, but there is none. And even more so, the first decan of Scorpio, where we are now, as the veil thins into Samhain. This is the absolute best time to be with your intuition. So do try and make a moment, if you can, to just feel into your higher consciousness, to sit in meditation and not to allow your thoughts to be what leads you, but to see if you can feel what's the emotion coming up, and can you not necessarily label it, but can you give it some sort of voice? Can you allow space for that emotion, that intuitive ping to flow through? So I would love to give you a little bit of sound just to finish up this session and give you 10 minutes or so of sound to just sit with so that you can reflect on all of the things I've shared today and just allow them to marinate slowly inside you as you decide if and how you're going to move through this weekend. Maybe you're just going to take to your bed and pull the duvet over. I know some people are really feeling that. I, for one, feel like this moon is all about the big push through, and it's breaking through and breaking free. The last 2 years has been brutal on a global level. It's been very tough personally, and I have had my sessions, my one-to-one space full of people on that same journey. And I feel if you also are feeling like you've really been through the mill the last couple of years, this is a really powerful moment to decide that this is now the end of that story, and we will be moving on with renewed resource, self-worth and value. Whatever this sticky, uncomfortable and challenging dance has been, it is now ready to bestow its final gifts. That's a relief, right? So I'm going to move us over to the sound, and we're going to spend a little bit of time together in the sound space, and I wish you a very beautiful, illuminating, expansive, and I'm even going to say hopeful eclipse, because I do think there is hope. I think the action being taken now is volatile, but it feels like it's on purpose. It's standing up and being heard, making your voice matter and count, and allowing action to flow from that voice, from that intention. It might be nice to journey through this sound seated, but of course you can do whatever you like in terms of the position you choose to receive in. Just beginning with a couple of nice deep breaths, and it's really beautiful, especially as we journey this axis of Taurus and Scorpio, which is so much about the lower chakras, to really feel safe, to really notice where you're plugged into earth. Allowing the exhales to really connect you down into ground, to feel that safety being held. Allowing the inhales to billow up through the heart and the throat. Just bringing a little lightness, knowing that no matter how heavy and challenging the energy, everything is impermanent. back into the edges of your body. Perhaps placing one hand on your heart and one towards the sacral region. Just taking a couple of moments to tune into these big overarching themes of this full moon eclipse. Perhaps something really clear has landed for you, perhaps your stillness and sound has opened the doorway for your onward journey in this work today. I wish you an illuminating and expansive journey through this big lunar wave, and please know I'm always here for your questions. If you would like to ask anything or get in touch, please just follow all the information below the video, and I look forward to sharing with you once again in beautiful India as we continue our lifelong odyssey through the stars.